The Charles Adler Show starts now.
So I must admit, there's a term that I've always been reluctant to use. It just doesn't feel important. It doesn't feel sophisticated. It doesn't even feel real to me. But I'm going to say uncle, 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 and concede to this term so that we can discuss what's behind the term. The term is culture wars. It really bothers me. Sandy Garossino is a former prosecutor. She's an outstanding columnist for the National Observer, and most important from our perspective, she's an outstanding national conversationalist. Sandy Garossino, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Charles.
I don't know whether you've had the same allergy, the term culture wars, but let's start with basics here. I never want to make the assumption that everybody knows precisely what we're talking about. And because I often hear people use the term really, really incorrectly, I just get the impression that it might require some specific definition. What is a culture war?
Oh boy. Where is Webster's when you need it, right? Well, I think that I think about this, and I think about how swiftly and dramatically things changed in the culture, acceptance of gay marriage, acceptance of, when the first Black Lives Matter, when that first broke out with the killing of George Floyd, and just the outpouring, the national outpouring. And I think there's been a swing of a backlash against that. A lot of people mad about feeling guilty about things, and just mad about a lot of things. Then, of course, we had COVID. So, of course, and there's the constant climate war. And it's almost like it's kind of strange how all of these different issues, which are not related to each other, kind of tee up and line up along partisan lines. And of course, people kind of pick the team that they want to be on, and then they just want to fight with the other team. So I guess
I was looking at a poll just before
National MMA.
Yeah, I was looking at a poll just before I joined you, and it was from a credible organization known as Quinnipiac, and the poll asked a relatively simple question of the American voters: if there's a national crisis like a COVID, like a 9/11, this week we're paying attention to the date because of the anniversary of 9/11 this week, and so if there is that kind of national crisis, who do you trust? Donald Trump or Joe Biden? And my radar, my GPS would say that Biden would win that hands down. Wrong. Trump gets more than 50%. Biden gets only 40%. And so we've got a situation now where people are living, we used to call it silos, but essentially people are deciding to choose what's real and what's not. And it feels like a Huxley novel. It doesn't feel like the real world to my world.
Well, and I think that disinformation, one of the things that I didn't mention was disinformation and how much that's been proliferating, and really the shattering of what were the traditional norms and sources of information that where people used to get their news. Now they're getting their news from their self-selected sources, and which are giving them the news that they want. So you can shop for your own news, right? Excuse me. And so one of the things that I think has been regrettable in all this, these same polls, these same Americans would probably say that inflation is out of sight when inflation has now dropped into the normal range. It's not quite where they want it to be, but it's vastly improved, and in one of the best inflation rates in the world. Or go to Europe, go to the UK, you'll see inflation off the charts. And Americans believe that their inflation, and so do Canadians probably, if you polled them, think inflation's crazy, think the economy's crazy, but we have very low inflation, we have very low unemployment, and we have rising incomes. But most people polled will say the economy is terrible. So, I think a lot of this is about news shopping.
Okay. So some people would say that a lot of this is about a narrow, relatively narrow, but important perspective. when I say narrow but important, food and shelter. While the price of food is not getting tossed around by inflation the way it is in Europe and some other countries, the price of housing certainly is. When you think about the average single home in Canada being worth more than $800,000, it's on the fast track to 900, just a matter of time before it's on the fast track to million. If I had said to you, even 5 years ago that the average price of a house in Canada by the year 2030 would be $1 million, I think you would have thought that I was, smoking something or just not reading the proper data. But there it is, and so I think that is unsettling to people. For what it's worth, when I was at university, I was taught by my professors. I'm talking about economics professors and sociology professors and political science professors, that there was nothing more dangerous for continuity, nothing more dangerous for order in a society than people feeling that inflation is out of control. There are few factors that can drive people crazy and frankly drive them to radical choices, political choices, when inflation is scaring the heck out of them.
But Charles, you and I, because we're not too far apart, that was when inflation was at 10 and 11%, when unemployment was was close to 10%. Remember when Kim Campbell said that we weren't going to see unemployment below double digits, or was it inflation? I can't remember. It was both of them were out of sight.
Both, absolutely. Yeah.
But having said that, excuse me for this throat. Having said that, while I say that inflation has dropped, the prices haven't dropped. The rate at which they are rising has fallen into under control. But housing is off the charts. It is absolutely a crisis. And I was talking about this 12 years ago when Vancouver was starting to have this hyperinflation. Vancouver's now, the housing prices are more than twice what they were in 2012 when I was first starting to advocate for getting control of housing prices. And I don't think there's any question. The fact that people are unable to, these numbers, the rents are shocking, absolutely shocking. They are unlivable. It is a crisis and it demands immediate attention. I don't think America quite has those numbers except in certain cities. But, in Canada, I think to a large extent, a lot of us have the commodification of housing as not just as an investment vehicle rather than just straight up shelter, I think is one of the most damaging things. And we've relied on it. It's a huge part of our GDP. Housing and rents, real estate are a massive percentage of our GDP. And it's just, it's inexcusable, and it is a substitute and it's a veil for other economic weaknesses that we've experienced. And boy, oh boy, I think that we may be seeing some governments paying the piper on this one.
Well, that's generally what happens. It doesn't matter what country we're talking about. When people are frightened that their wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living, they tend to gravitate to political change. So Matt Gurney, who used to be with the National Post, and he's got a Substack right now, The Line, along with Jen Gerson, and I'm sure you're very familiar with him. He's also got a morning show on Sirius XM. So Matt Gurney, I've known for many years. We're fellow travelers. We don't agree on everything, but so what? I take his thinking seriously, and he was just reflecting on his own life. He's got a home in Toronto. It's not in the toniest section of Toronto. It's not Rosedale. It's not Forest Hill. It's not the Bridle Path. Just as I would say, if we were in Vancouver, I say it's not British properties, but it's a upper middle class neighborhood. And he said that he bought this house about 10 years ago. And he simply could not afford to buy that house right now. And a lot of people are looking at their mortgage payments, which because of interest rates have doubled. They're renewing a mortgage and they're having to pay a monthly nut of twice as much as they were doing years ago. Well, very few people have had their wages and salaries increased by 100%.
Yeah.
That is the kind of thing, I think, that poisons the well. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think so. I think there are a lot of people, homeowners, and I mean, there's going to be blood on the floor, I think, in economic terms. So many people are really, really struggling. They're going to be facing this. But then the question is, are we going to see a massive housing correction? I think that's the question that I'm interested in. As we start to see these interest rates really, really bite, because here in Vancouver, excuse me, here in Vancouver, I mean, this is our bread and butter, is real estate speculation, and there are so many people who are way out there, way out on their, and they're really, really exposed. So the question will be, what happens when they have to sell? And we're already starting to hear it here in Vancouver of people, distressed sales, and that's going to start to claw. But the tragedy, of course, is that when you hit a market correction, who does it hurt? It hurts the most recent entrants, the people who have somehow clawed and scraped together enough to have a down payment and enough to get financing, and they get in at the top of the market and they can get wiped out so easily. And so we've I feel like I was a beneficiary, right? I bought my former husband and I bought our first house in 1988 or something like that. And like I've been laughing ever since. I mean, at the time, we thought this is terrible. This is the top of the market. It's never going to be like this. We're at such risk. And of course, the market just took off from there and went higher, higher. It's a real fear, but I think there is going to be a real correction. But more than that, as we all know, with all of the immigrants who have come in, and the housing crisis that we already have, we have to build housing. We have to get housing, and housing has to be more affordable.
So, Sandy, let me ask you about that. I mean, there's a reluctance to ever discuss immigration in this country because so many people just slam the brakes on, going, well, if you've got an issue with immigration, it must be because you're racist. If I find that, sort of intellectually dishonest, I find that unethical. But nevertheless, that's where so many conversations end up going. So at the risk of people hurling ridiculous and absurd epithets, if we just simply do not have the housing for 500,000 new Canadians every year, not to mention that we've got over 800,000 people in this country right now who are foreign students. If we simply don't have the housing for millions of new people, why wouldn't we put the brakes on immigration? Why wouldn't we simply deal rationally with this idea that this is racist and say, this is not racist, but it certainly is anti-Canadian if you feel that someone calling you a name is going to make you slam the brakes on the entire economy. Mm-hmm. Because if we have a housing bubble that bursts and prices go into Niagara Falls mode, that hurts everybody. I mean, it's not just about affordability. It's about where our asset base is. And most people have most of their retirement eggs in the housing basket. Mm-hmm. You talk about a calamitous lack of confidence in the country and the economy, the idea that Canada is broken. That's the kind of thing that fuels it. It's not just about inflation. In this case, we're talking about deflation.
Yeah. Well, and I was actually just speaking to an economist yesterday, as a matter of fact, and who had an eminent and economist who's been around for a very long time, and she had a really interesting take on this, because her take was, I was asking the question, we have such low unemployment. We need people to be doing these jobs. We need to be bringing in nurses and doctors, health professionals. We need to be accrediting people. We've got this crying need. At the same time as we can't house everybody, and we're having this huge crisis. And her take was quite interesting. I was asking, why do we have this unemployment problem, and why has it persisted after COVID? And her take was that a lot of our employees, it's our demographics, a lot of our employees aged out. So we don't necessarily see that when the boomers start to retire. So we're having now a tsunami of boomers who are retiring. At the same time as we don't have enough people to come fill in the gaps. But those boomers, they didn't die. They still have housing. They still need housing. And by the way, sorry, we're hoarding housing. I'll speak for my generation. We are. And we've got, in a way, we've got kind of a dislocation in the economic supply chain of Canada. So we need new people to be coming in. It's not racist to be concerned about where are these people going to sleep at night? How are they going to live? And by the way, how are we going to house the people that we can't house now? That's not racist. It's like a dislocation in the economy. But I think that it just, to me, points to get moving on housing fast. And we should be pausing. We should have a rational immigration policy. Yes, we need to be bringing in people to be taking those jobs. We need young people to be generating the incomes and employment that is going to help to support the healthcare that all these aging boomers are going to need. So we need those employees, but we just can't have them coming in at the same rate every year. We have to solve the housing issue ahead of the immigration issue. But these are connected. And I was quite surprised to hear this take that it's really about demographics and our aging population. You know, China's going through the same thing, and look what's happening to their economy. And they're not bringing in immigrants to the extent Canada does.
So we were talking about the culture wars a few moments ago, and it just occurs to me that in Saskatchewan, the Conservative Party there, and they call themselves the Sask Party, the Saskatchewan Party, that doesn't matter why, but that's the Conservative Party. That's the right of center party. And in Saskatchewan, they've been governing for quite a while, and the polls say they can, govern until the cows come home. And at the moment, their premier is now talking about invoking the notwithstanding clause. Mm-hmm. And this has something to do with the pronoun war, the culture war in schools. Is this something that you take seriously? And I ask because clearly the right is raising a lot of ruckus about this and raising a lot of funds. And of course, those people who are trans are definitely feeling put upon. But there are a number of families right now who are convinced that there's a movement in the schools to convert their children from the current orientation to something else. Once again, it sounds crazy. It sounds like science fiction. But for a premier, Scott Moe in this case, to be talking about invoking the notwithstanding clause, something's rotten in Denmark.
Well, this is just part of a way of alarmism and just throwing fuel on the fire. There has been no ruling from the Supreme Court of Canada about any of this, and we don't even know what kind of rules he's talking about. To me, this whole issue, I'm very disturbed by the narrative, and we talked about social media earlier, the narrative that has been going around is, and it's common in the United States, you see it all the time, that progressives, that they're groomers, they're pedophiles, all of this is feeding this kind of perception that is very out there on social media. I think there's a legitimate issue when you're talking about a mental health issue with a child, and is there some, what is the communication between the school and the family about the child? I feel like there's a legitimate issue on that sometimes, but there's also a lot of children that, are afraid of their families. And are we going to have a rule that just blanket, there's no judgment here, there's no room for judgment, and there's no trust in the professionalism of trained people? I mean, my experience in the school system, which is, years old now, was that these were really professional, thoughtful, sensitive people. And I think most people feel that way about their teachers. But through disinformation, they've got a perception that these other teachers are weirdos who are going to do something crazy. And I would love for our political leadership to tone down the rhetoric, because they know what they're doing. They know that they're feeding into this, to the kind of rumors that are floating around on social media that are just the most revolting rumors and have no basis in truth. Scott Moe should not be using or threatening the notwithstanding clause unless he's tried to pass legislation and the courts have blocked it. But we're nowhere near there. He's really just, I think he's just talking out of his hat to try and I don't know what, because like you say, he's not in any political risk. Maybe he's trying to amp up the volume to help Pierre Poilievre, because everything seems to be a tag team that way.
But I'm just trying to put myself in the position of a school teacher. So I'm teaching math or I'm teaching English in grade 6. I cannot imagine, because I have a family and I have friends. I cannot imagine justifying to my family and friends that I'm recommending to young people that they have significant sexual surgery if they're feeling like they're trapped in another person's body. I can understand why you would have some experts that would be counseling them on this, but the idea that a teacher is sticking their nose in it, as it were, and trying to sort of be an advocate for surgical procedures when we're talking about children. And this is what I keep
papers. They're marking exams. They're trying to get
them. But I mean, I keep hearing. I don't see any evidence of this, but I keep hearing these accusations. I mean, and if you push back on it and say, "Where's the evidence?" you get called a groomer or a pedophile. So, at that point, it's a conversation stopper.
I mean, this is kind of what the problem with the culture wars is people just making baseless accusations. First of all, if minors are not getting surgery, okay? Minors are not getting surgeries except in extremely exceptional cases where there's something else that's going on. Nobody is transitioning. That's not happening, and all the evidence is pointing to that. The issue, the question that people are talking about is about taking hormones to suppress development until a minor is old enough to make their own decisions as an adult. And that's what we accept, is that people are old enough to make those decisions when they reach the age of majority, whether that's 18 or 19 in this country. What's interesting to me, having spent a lot of time with in the athletic world, is that dollars to donuts, there are 10 times or 100 times as many parents dosing their kids with growth hormones to get them into the NHL than there are parents who are, with doctor's assistance and in consultation with medical professionals, suppressing their kids' sexual development until they are adults and can make these decisions for themselves. But I haven't heard a thing. Have you heard any? Has it been on the national news? Has there been a complaint? Have premiers been shouting from the rooftops about parents giving their kids steroids to get them into professional sports?
No, they haven't, because the idea of having a child in the NHL or the CFL or the NFL is just too appetizing, and if it takes some chemical assistance, and so be it. Everybody does it. What do you make of the idea that some parents are complaining about sports teams, specifically female sports teams, where the females are being bested by those people who might be transitioning? In other words, they are biological. They were born male, and therefore they've got more strength and more speed. I'm talking about a sweeping generalization here. Not all males are strong and speedy, but you've got some situations, whether it's soccer or any other sport. Is there a way to compromise there? Is there, if someone were to suggest that you get if you're going to be on a male team or female team, it's based on your original biology, not based on your feelings. Is that deeply offensive, and does that take us to a bad place?
I don't know the answer to this question, but you know what? Nobody cared about girls' sports until this started to happen. Like, as someone who comes from an athletic background, athletes in our family, Olympians and whatnot, nobody gave a rat's ass about women's sports until now. Now all of a sudden we have to, thank God for women's soccer and these other sports, and that's all that's really great. Again, to me, it's one of these things where people are suddenly finding something to care about. But I don't know the answer, because to me, it does seem pretty obvious that someone who has hit the age of 15 as a biological male and then has some kind of transition, I'm uncomfortable with it, because my natural inclination is to mind my own business and let people do what they want. But
but this issue, whether this issue, I think is driving some of this. Parents who ordinarily aren't ideological are upset. I'm wondering whether or not we should go all the way. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering whether we should go all the way in sports and simply have mixed teams, men and women. And they should be on those teams based on their skill set. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to know that many women are far stronger and far more athletic than many men. We in various sports we have, like in boxing, we got lightweight and medium weight and featherweight. Might not that be the ultimate solution, just to have mixed teams, and you're on a team based not on whatever organs you were born with, but based on your skills.
Does that seem like something that's going to happen? I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm always being Canadian. I'm always looking for a compromise, because I just find this argument so absolutely odious, because people get labeled and the conversation stops, and the conversation only continues with the people who are the most odious.
And let's face it. I mean, like I say, I generally come down on the mind your own business, and it's people should do what they, funnily enough, the left is now the pro freedom side, and the right is no, they want government control. So everybody has switched sides on that. But I have to admit, I think that probably the average Canadian probably doesn't feel that way about transgendered and gay and lesbian athletes, and what's happening. I don't know. This is one of those things that I feel like it's in 10 or 15 years, it's going to have worked its way through the system, and we'll have arrived at some solution, and everybody will have got used to it, or we'll just be at each other's necks forever. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and just to wrap it on this portion of the conversation, it's fair to say there are people who have it in their interests to keep these controversies going, and they raise a lot of money on them. And I don't have to tell you that political parties have some interest. In this case, parties on the right, scaring the hell out of parents and telling them that we need to have notwithstanding clauses. We need to challenge the courts. We need to challenge God knows who. Otherwise, your children are unsafe at school. Let me go after just one more item here, and that would be where you think the economy will be 2 years from now. And I say 2 years from now because that's when Trudeau is most likely to drop the writ and have another election. The deal he's got with Jagmeet Singh, I don't see that falling apart. If there's an election right now, Jagmeet Singh loses all his powers. I don't see him challenging the prime minister. The economy, James Carville used to say, it's the economy, stupid. The economy does matter. We've been talking about the economy in this conversation. Do you see the economy much improved 2 years from now, and therefore creating a different kind of political field than what we're looking at right now based on the latest polling?
Well, it's interesting because as you were saying, as you were sort of closing the door on the last issue, and I was thinking, man, you know, we've come a long way. Remember when it was all vaccines and inflation, and those have disappeared. So now we have to have be mad about transgendered youth and teachers and whatnot. So it's always like there has to be some new issue. The interesting thing about the economy is how much public perception now is governed not by the real data, but by perceptions about what's going on. And the average person, I think, thinks the economy is not doing as well as it is. But we get back to housing affordability. And I think that this is the Achilles heel of the Trudeau government. This is the one persistent and pretty intransigent that I think that it's not going to be solved in 2 years. It's probably going to be worse in 2 years, because anything that, as you know, any projects that might be greenlit today, first of all, there's a lot of developers, a lot of builders who are nervous and sitting on the sidelines because they are already overextended and over leveraged, and these interest rates are killing them. And so that housing is not going to be built in 2 years. Anything that gets, so we're not going to see a significant change in that issue. And I think this has been the sleeper issue, that this is the lion that has just woken up and roared. I do not see that changing, and it is a doozy. And this has the potential to I think be a wave. I think this is something that Poilievre knows, and he's hammering away at this. But it's not just, that's not just a gimmick. Like, I think the transgender thing is a gimmick. I think housing affordability is real. It's not going to change. It's going to be a vulnerability. It could be the straw that breaks the camel's back for the Liberal government.
So, Sandy, I just need to ask you about the issue revolving around not affordability, but I need to ask you the question that most people are now discussing. It has nothing to do with affordability, nothing to do with inflation. It's the COVID thing. We're worried that it's back. We're being told that a new vaccine is out by Moderna. It'll be coming to Canada very, very soon. We're also being told by health authorities to mask. I've noticed that you on Twitter/X are talking about masking. Do you have a feeling that we're back into the nasty business of a pandemic?
I don't think that we'll get to where we were before. I mean, the real panic that we had in 2021 was, can we get a vaccine? We got a vaccine in shockingly fast time, just record time, and we got it made, produced, and distributed. I mean, it was really remarkable. And we are having consistent new vaccines are coming on stream. And I think that people who are getting COVID are not suffering as much as they were. So I don't know that, absent some new virus, it appears that all the variants that have been coming out of COVID have not been having the devastating impact that the first wave or the first couple of waves had. So I'm not so concerned about what COVID will do. I have started to mask largely because I'm starting to read the data, and they're saying that if you had COVID, you're 5 times more likely to have some sort of heart-related or stroke-related event than if you just got the vaccine. And I have in my own case, I've experienced it. My blood pressure went up for the first time in my life, just crazy numbers. So I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see that happen in my family. So I'm masking. I have a 92-year-old mom that I care for a lot. I care about, I love, but I also care. I'm also caregiving, and so I have to be very careful for her sake. So I hope that a lot of other people, I hope masking doesn't become the kind of divisive thing that it was before. And I hope we're going to get past the feeling that this is some sort of political flag if you're wearing a mask. Because I think we should be masking when we're in public places.
Sandy, both of us clearly have a tick, so we apologize to listeners and viewers about that. But no, that's we're just in the same boat, as it were, with millions of other Canadians. It's called the flu. It's called the fall. It's called the days are shorter, the temperatures are cooler, and stuff happens. Sandy Garossino of the National Observer, thank you, as always, for the stimulating conversation.
Charles, thanks so much.